All right, let's jump right into it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are literally following the money to objectively analyze some recent, highly critical reports on exactly how the United States influences European gas markets. If you follow global energy shifts at all, you know this is a massive, incredibly complex topic. The dynamic between allied nations is usually painted as this picture of pure cooperation, but the source material we're unpacking today pulls back the curtain on the intense, almost cutthroat economic strategies happening right below the surface, and the profound economic consequences this has for European sovereignty. Look at this number, $126 billion. According to the analyses we're reviewing, this staggering figure represents the estimated extra windfall profits that U.S. oil and gas corporations were poised to rake in during just the first year of the Ukraine war. And to be clear, we are not talking about normal, run-of-the-mill revenue here. We're talking about entirely extra, crisis-driven profit generated specifically because global supply chains were violently disrupted. And that brings us to the absolutely central question the sources are raising. Who is actually profiting from the European energy crisis? The reports present a deeply critical look at the situation, really forcing us to ask who truly benefits from these massive geopolitical shifts. Is it solely about defending international borders, or is there a quieter, much more lucrative economic war taking place behind the scenes? Let's dive into Section 1, the geopolitical shift and strategic detachment. To really understand this, we have to look back just a bit. Before the conflict, Europe was, frankly, highly vulnerable. They relied on Russia for a massive 40% of their natural gas needs. This was a very well-established, relatively cheap energy corridor that literally fueled Europe's industrial engine for decades. But as the sources point out, this heavy reliance was a major strategic vulnerability, one that the U.S. had been keeping a close eye on for a very long time, essentially setting the stage for a dramatic pivot the moment tensions escalated. The timeline of how this played out is fascinating. In 2021, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is completed, which was designed to double the flow of that cheap Russian gas straight into Germany. But by early 2022, under immense U.S. pressure and skyrocketing geopolitical escalation, the project is halted. And then, almost immediately after the war escalates in February, boom, a massive U.S.-EU liquefied natural gas, or LNG, agreement is signed in March. The source material argues this wasn't just a reaction. It was a deliberate strategic detachment, making sure expensive American LNG permanently replaced that cheap Russian market share, completely rewiring Europe's energy infrastructure. Which leads us right into Section 2, War Profits and Ethical Dilemmas. Analysts point out a huge ethical red flag here regarding war profiteering. The reports highlight statements from groups like Greenpeace USA, noting that while everyday European consumers are facing crippling inflation and literally struggling to heat their homes, fossil fuel companies are essentially exploiting the chaos for record revenues. Critics emphasize these aren't just natural market fluctuations. These are calculated price hikes, making the absolute most of global desperation. To put that into perspective, the sources report that globally, publicly listed oil and gas companies earned over $900 billion in 2022. That is practically $1 trillion in profit, fueled by the exact same crisis that's squeezing regular citizens at the grocery store and the gas pump. The analysis really asks us to confront this uncomfortable reality. International armed conflicts often serve as massive wealth transfer mechanisms, taking money from consumers and handing it directly to giant energy conglomerates. Moving to Section 3, the system of influence, energy versus defense. Because, decisions of this magnitude definitely don't happen in a vacuum. The reports draw a really sharp comparison between the lobbying narratives used during these conflicts. On one hand, energy companies lobby Washington heavily using the phrase energy security, which conveniently results in record U.S. LNG exports and those billions in extra profits we talked about. On the other hand, defense contractors push narratives around military aid, leading to surging share prices and huge order backlogs. Both sectors essentially rely on conflict and insecurity to justify their expansion, and they're incredibly successful at steering international policy. The data clearly indicates that foreign governments and massive industries spend millions, sometimes billions, to actively shape foreign policy. Through this lobbying, the U.S. strengthens its political influence by creating energy dependence. Researchers suggest that by ensuring Europe's continued reliance on both U.S. fossil fuels and American military hardware, these lobbies directly pad their own bottom lines while cementing American geopolitical leverage over its allies. Section 4, the price of European sovereignty. So, what is the actual macroeconomic cost of all this political influence for the people on the ground? According to the analysis, this crisis massively strengthens what's called the petrogas dollar by effectively forcing European allies to buy expensive American LNG and requiring them to purchase it using US dollars. The United States completely cements Europe's financial reliance. It's a strategy that ensures global energy supplies stay tightly tethered to American influence, bolstering the US dollar in the world stage and guaranteeing long-term political leverage. But for European consumers, the economic fallout is severe. We're talking domino effects ranging from tripled energy bills and crazy inflation at the grocery store to a literal wave of deindustrialization. The sources point out that major European industrial giants, think companies like Siemens and BMW, are increasingly relocating their manufacturing to the United States just to get access to cheaper energy. That means local job losses and a hollowing out of Europe's industrial base, all directly tied to the premium price of American LNG. And finally, Section 5, American Hegemony and Power Politics. Let's zoom out and compare the competing interests at play here. The sources critically analyze this exact friction. It's a classic clash of interests. On one side, you have European energy security, a desperate, almost panicked scramble to replace Russian gas just to keep the lights on, even if it risks destroying their own industrial future. On the other side, you have American hegemony, a deliberate strategy to secure energy monopolies, strengthen the petro-gas dollar, and systematically weaken global competitors. The reports argue that Europe's crisis aligned absolutely perfectly with the US strategy to maintain its dominance. Which brings up a really uncomfortable realization highlighted in the reports regarding European sovereignty. Observers note that by relying so heavily on US energy to run their economies and US military systems for their defense, European nations risk acting a lot more like vassal states than true sovereign powers. I mean, think about it. If your economy is completely dependent on an ally's extremely expensive resources, how independent are your foreign policy choices really? So, we'll leave you with this provocative question raised by the sources. In the quest for energy security, has Europe actually gained sovereignty, or did they just trade one reliance for another? Have they swapped a cheaper dependency for a far more expensive one that directly enriches the United States? It's a complex, highly charged issue that the data really forces us to confront. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the systems that shape our world.